Hello everyone and welcome back to my kitchen. The holidays are fast approaching and you know what that means, tamale making season. Making tamales can be such a long process, but today we're going to try to fit it all in as quickly as possible, but without skipping any of the steps. So if you would like to join me, grab yourself a cup of coffee and let's get started. For this recipe, we're going to be using New Mexico chili pods. These are very accessible in just about any grocery store, but you can also use Chile Guajillo. These come in a variety of spice levels. You can get them hot, mild, or even sweet. You can purchase the one that most fits your level of spiciness. We're going to be using the entire bag, which is an 8-ounce bag. We're going to start out by removing the stems and taking out the seeds from each of the peppers. The easiest way to do that is to remove the stems and squeezing out the seeds. They usually fall out pretty easily, but if you're having a hard time, you can use a pair of kitchen scissors to open the pepper to remove the seeds. As I'm cleaning them, I'm placing them in a bowl. Once we're done cleaning all the peppers, we're going to take them over to the sink and give them a good rinse. Once they're nice and clean, set them aside and we're going to prepare the rest of the ingredients for the meat. The meat preparation can take anywhere from 3 to 4 hours to complete. So make sure you get that process going first thing in the morning, or you can cook it overnight in a slow cooker. To boil the meat, we're going to need 1 medium white onion and a whole head of garlic cloves. The garlic cloves I'm going to leave whole like this, and the onion I'm going to cut in half and remove the first layer. For the meat, we're going to use 8 pounds of beef. This packaging is labeled as tamale meat, but if you can't find a packaging labeled like this, you can use boneless chuck roast. These pieces have a good layer of fat and we're going to leave it on there so we can have a nice flavorful broth. Before placing the meat into the pot, we're going to give it a good rinse. The big pieces like this one, I'm going to cut it into smaller pieces so it can cook faster and evenly with the rest of the pieces. I'm using a 16-quart stock pot. Once we have all the meat in there, we're going to fill it up about halfway with water. Place it on the burner on high heat. Add the onion, the garlic, and the peppers. You can also boil the peppers in a separate pot if you prefer, but I like to add them to the meat because it gives the meat more flavor and you also get a more flavorful broth. We will be using the broth later on for the masa, so you want to make sure you have enough water in the pot so we can have enough broth left over for the masa. I'm going to crumble in 4 cubes of beef bouillon. I'm using the cubes because I ran out of the regular powdered one, but if you have the regular powdered one, you can use that one, or you can use chicken bouillon or salt. Once it reaches the boiling point, we're going to turn down the burner to low, cover it, and we'll come back and check on it in an hour. It's been about an hour. Our meat is not quite done yet, but we are going to check on it and we're going to fish out all the peppers. We're going to transfer them to a bowl and we're going to set them aside until the meat is done. Cover it and we'll come back and check on it in an hour. Meanwhile, we're going to prepare the corn husk, and for that we're going to need hot water. I'm going to fill up a 10-quart stock pot about 3/4 of the way with water. We're going to place it on the burner on high heat, and while we're waiting for the water to heat up, we're going to separate the corn husks. As you're separating the corn husks, you want to remove any hair or residue that's on the corn husk. Sometimes you may find little bugs. Yes, I did say little bugs. These are corn husks and they were grown outside, so you might find little bugs. You can just remove them by running them under water before placing them in the bowl. You can use a bowl or you can also use the sink. Just make sure to plug it before you begin to separate the husks. Once our husks are separated and are nice and clean, we're going to retrieve the water from the stove and we're going to pour it directly over the husks. You want to make sure all the husks are completely submerged in the water, and for that I'm going to leave a little bit of the water in the pot and place it right over the husk. This is going to help to weigh it down to make sure all the husks are completely submerged in the water, and if you need to add more water to the pot to weigh it down a little bit better, you can do so. It's been a little bit over an hour and our meat is now ready. We're going to fish out all the pieces of meat and transfer them to a large pan. We're also going to fish out the onion and the garlic and place it with the rest of the peppers. And using a strainer, we're going to fish out any large pieces of residue that still remain in the pot. This is going to give us a nice clean broth to work with. Scoop out 3 cups of the broth from the pot and place it in a measuring cup or a bowl. Set it aside so it can cool down, and meanwhile we're going to begin to shred the meat. You can shred the meat by hand, but if it's too hot to handle, you can use 2 forks and shred it like this. The meat should fall apart fairly easily since it's so well cooked. For the sauce, transfer all the peppers to the blender, including the onions that were in the pot, except for the garlic. We're going to use fresh garlic for the sauce. I'm going to add 4 large garlic cloves. And for seasonings, we're going to add 2 tablespoons of cumin, a couple cubes of beef bouillon or salt, and 2 cups of the water that we reserved from the pot. Blend on high for a good minute or 2 or until your sauce is nice and smooth. Pour it over the beef and reserve 1 cup of the sauce for the preparation of the masa. Give it a good stir until all the sauce is well incorporated with the meat. Add 1 to 2 cups of broth from the pot and continue stirring until everything is well combined. You want the meat to have a little bit of consistency. You don't want it to be too dry. At this point, you can also taste it to see if it needs additional seasonings. Whenever you're making anything, you always want to taste it to make sure it fits your needs, because my salt needs could differ depending to yours or your family. The seasonings can also make a difference depending on the brand that you're using, so you always want to taste when you're cooking just to make sure it's the right seasoning for you. Once everything is well incorporated and it looks similar to this, we're going to let it simmer on medium heat for a good 10 minutes. We're going to turn it off, cover it. Now we can move on to prepare the masa. To prepare the masa, I'm going to use the stand-up mixer. You can also mix by hand, but just keep in mind that it might take you a little bit longer if you're mixing by hand. We're going to start out by adding the lard to the mixer. I'm going to add 1.5 cups of lard for 10 cups of masa. We're going to whip the lard for a good 5 minutes on medium-high speed or until it's nice and fluffy. After 5 minutes of mixing the lard, I'm going to remove the bowl to begin to add the masa. I'm using the Maseca brand, but you can use whichever brand you prefer. We're going to use 10 cups of masa for the amount of lard that we used. Once we have all our 10 cups in the bowl, we're going to add the remainder of the ingredients. We're going to add the sauce that we set aside in the blender. I'm going to add an additional cup of water to the blender to get the remainder of the sauce that's stuck to the side of the blender. I'm going to give it a good shake and add it to the bowl as well. We're also going to add 2 additional cups of the broth, 3 tablespoons of baking powder, and 1 to 2 tablespoons of salt. The broth also has seasoning and salt, so you don't want to add too much salt at the beginning. You want to start out small and work your way up if it needs more salt. We're going to place the bowl back on the mixer and we're going to begin by mixing on low speed. If you're using a stand-up mixer and you have a guard for your bowl, you might want to use one of those because I did have a little bit of an accident at the beginning. We're going to start out slow and slowly work our way up on the speed until everything is well incorporated. As you're mixing, add more broth as needed. I ended up using a total of 6 cups of the broth. Mix on medium-high speed for a good 15 to 20 minutes. And the best way to see if the masa is ready is by taking a small amount of masa and dropping it in a glass of water. If it floats down to the bottom, continue mixing for a little bit longer. Continue testing the masa until the masa floats to the top of the water. Once it floats to the top, the masa is now ready and we can continue to prepare the tamales. Remove the husk from the water and place them in a strainer over the sink. Before you begin to prepare the tamales, you want to set everything up. You want to have your masa, the meat, the hojas, and also a container to place the tamales once you wrap them. I'm using a cookie sheet, but you can use any other type of container that you prefer. And now we're ready to prepare some tamales. Using a spoon or a spatula, add a good amount of the masa and place it right in the bottom portion of the husk. Spread it out evenly. Try not to get some on the tip of the husk because then it's going to make it difficult to close. Once it's evenly spread, we're going to add a good spoonful of the meat right in the middle. You can add as little or as much as you want, but if you have a small husk, you want to make sure not to add too much meat because then it's going to be difficult to close. Fold over one side and then the other. And the tip, we're going to fold it over like this, pinch it close, and place it on the cookie sheet. We're going to continue to prepare the rest until we run out of the meat and the masa. With the amount of ingredients we used, we made a little bit over 6 dozen tamales. I think we could have made a little bit more, but I like to add a lot of meat to my tamales. Making tamales is a great way to spend time with your family. If you have a lot of kids at home, now is the time to have them jump in and help. Holidays are always the best time to make tamales because that's when you have a lot of family members at home and you have a lot of helping hands. And it's a great way to spend time with the family. As you're making the tamales, you're going to run into a lot of small husks that are not usable. Don't discard those, set those aside because we will be using those later when we cook the tamales. For the larger husks like this one right here, I like to make what I call a double tamal. Repeat the same process of adding the masa on the husk, spread it all across the husk like this. It might be a little bit challenging without it having to fold over, and especially if you have small hands. Once you have the good amount of the masa, you can add a small portion of the meat on one side, fold it over like this, and repeat the process on the other side. Fold it over just like the other one and place it on the cookie sheet. And that's what I call a double tamale, 2 tamales in one. As you're getting closer to finishing up, you want to heat up some water in a large stock pot. The hot water we're going to use for the steamer. Once the water is nice and hot, pour it into the steamer. Very carefully place the divider in the steamer and arrange your tamales standing up like this. The smaller husk that we set aside, we're going to place over the tamales like this to cover the entire top. This is not only going to help hold in the steam, but it's also going to help to cook the tamales a little bit faster and evenly. You can also place a clean kitchen towel right on top for better results. Cover and steam on low-medium heat for about an hour. Before you begin to enjoy your tamales, you want to remove them from the steamer and let them cool down for about 10 minutes. If you try to open them right away, they're going to seem a little bit soft and it's going to seem like they're not quite done yet. But once they cool down, they do tend to harden up a little bit. And a great way to see if they're done, as you can see in this one, the masa is peeling away from the husk. So that's a great indication to let you know that they are ready. And now for the moment we've all been waiting for all morning, the taste test. Let's open these up and see how delicious they turned out. And just by the smell, I can already tell they're gonna be delicious. I wish you could smell this right now, and look how meaty they are. This is just the way I love my tamales, with lots of meat. Now the taste test. It's good. Here, try it. Thank you so much for stopping by today. I really hope you found this video helpful, and if you did, give me a big thumbs up. And if you're new to this channel and would like to see more videos like this, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on future recipes. And if you're already a subscriber, thank you so much, and I'll see you in our next video. Thank you so much for watching.